To make cake balls that can also be used for cake pops, you will need a baked and completely cooled cake. You can use a cake that was made using a recipe or a boxed cake mix, or you can even use a pre-made store-bought cake without frosting. And just for reference, a boxed cake mix prepared as directed on the box can easily be baked in a 9x13 dish such as this one. But you can bake the cake in whichever pans you have using the guidelines of your recipe or directions on the box. You will also need a cookie sheet that is lined with foil and wax paper. The wax paper is more important than the foil. I just use the foil because then I do not have to wash the pan afterwards. But the wax paper prevents the cake balls from sticking and makes them easier to remove once they are set. Also, make sure that the cookie sheet you choose can sit flat in your freezer for when it is time to freeze the cake balls. It is okay to use whatever plates, pans, or baking sheets that you want as long as they have a flat surface. Just make sure that whatever you use has raised edges to prevent the cake balls from accidentally rolling off your sheet. The next thing that I think is one of the best tools you can have for making cake balls that are all the same size is a small scoop. The one that I use is 1½ tablespoons, and I find it makes the perfect size for cake balls and cake pops. And of course, the last thing that you will need is your buttercream frosting of the flavor of your choice. You can even use store-bought frosting if you do not feel like making any, and it still works just as well. Now that my cake is completely cooled, it is time to crumble it. As you can see, the reason why I like to bake my cake in this dish is because I am able to do the entire process in the same dish. But if you use other cake pans, you can just transfer your cooled cake into a large bowl to make your cake ball dough. After your cake is completely crumbled, you can then add your frosting to make your dough. I start off by adding just about ½ cup of frosting. But take note that if you use a smaller size cake than what I have here, you will also need to use less frosting to start. It is important not to add too much frosting, otherwise your cake balls will not be firm enough to hold their shape and they will be difficult to dip when making cake pops. You may have noticed that I just used some cake to cover the frosting before starting to squish the frosting and cake together. This just makes it a little bit less messy. Make sure you thoroughly combine your frosting and your cake crumbs so that you can form a compact dough. Once you can see that the cake does not break apart when trying to press it together, then you know that you have added enough frosting. This looks pretty good. If by chance the dough is not holding together when you try to form a ball, you will need to add a little bit more frosting. Since this dough was okay, I did not have to add any more frosting. And now I can make my cake balls. You can see here how I am scooping my dough and then using the side of my dish to level and compact each scoop to make sure that all of my cake balls are the same size. You will then notice that after I release the dough from my scoop, I take time and use my hands to really compact the dough before rolling it into a ball. This is important because it makes sure that your dough is packed tight enough to hold its shape and not break apart, especially when it comes time to place the sticks in when making cake pops. And this is what happens if you do not tightly pack the dough before rolling your ball. It just breaks right apart. But sometimes, even after you compact your dough and you roll it into a ball, you'll notice that it is still not holding together. First, try to compact the dough a little bit more and re-roll it and see if it stays together. That is all I needed to do here, but if yours still does not stay together, then you will need to add a little bit more frosting to your dough and squish it all together again. But since mine was okay, I do not actually have a video of that part. And then you can finish rolling all of your cake balls. After you are finished, just place your tray of cake balls into your freezer to freeze overnight. Some people skip this step and dip their cake balls right away, but this is just the technique that works best for me. And since I sell a lot of cake balls, this just allows me to have inventory in my freezer. After your cake balls have been in the freezer overnight, they will be firm enough to transfer into a resealable baggie or an airtight container. It is a good idea to label your bag or your container with the date and the quantity of cake balls. The number may vary, but when I make a 9x13 inch cake, I usually get somewhere around 60 cake balls. This time I got 59. You can put your cake balls back into the freezer and store them for future use, or you can take the steps to use them sooner. You can check out my other video that gives a very detailed demonstration on how to dip your cake balls. But I just wanted to mention that before you can dip your cake balls, you have to gradually bring them to room temperature before you can dip them. This will prevent the candy coating or chocolate from cracking as they dry. For more helpful tips and techniques, I recommend watching my other video on dipping cake balls and cake pops. If you found this video helpful, please feel free to subscribe and/or check out my channel where you will find other tutorials on baking and decorating.